For nearly a decade, Ava and Daniel had shared a life that seemed, from the outside, as solid as stone. They had met in their mid-20s at a mutual friend's wedding, where sparks had flown instantly. Over time, their bond deepened into something beautiful and profound. They built a life together, moved into a cozy apartment, and grew in ways they hadn't anticipated. Ava, an interior designer, loved crafting spaces that reflected her inner world, while Daniel, a software engineer, was methodical, logical, and consistent. They complemented each other. Ava brought creativity and passion to their relationship, and Daniel grounded them with his stability and love. But as with any long-term relationship, things began to shift. Slowly at first, so subtle that neither of them noticed. And then, over the course of the last 2 years, the undercurrents of discontent turned into quiet waves of frustration and resentment. Ava had always been passionate, alive with energy and ideas, but as the years wore on, she felt stifled. The rhythms of their relationship had become predictable. Daniel, though kind and dependable, had begun to fade into the background of her life. She missed the spark, the excitement that had once been between them. Their conversations had turned from dreams and plans to logistics and obligations. They still loved each other, but it felt different, like a habit, more than an intense emotional connection. One evening, as Daniel worked late at the kitchen table, Ava sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, lost in thought. Her mind wandered back to how things used to be. She remembered the wild nights out, the spontaneous trips, and the late-night conversations that lasted until dawn. She missed that. She missed feeling alive. The longing for something new, something thrilling, gnawed at her. It was during this time that she reconnected with Liam. Liam had been a colleague from a few years back, someone Ava had always admired from afar. He was charismatic, confident, and always seemed to carry an air of excitement wherever he went. They had run into each other at a gallery opening 2 months earlier, and since then, their occasional texts had turned into more frequent conversations. At first, it was innocent, a few compliments, a light flirtation. But as their interactions deepened, so did Ava's feelings. Liam represented the passion she felt was missing from her life. He was bold where Daniel was cautious, unpredictable where Daniel was reliable. One evening, when Daniel was away on a work trip, Ava and Liam met for dinner. She hadn't planned for anything to happen. In fact, she told herself it was just 2 old friends catching up. But as the evening wore on, and the wine flowed, Ava felt something she hadn't in a long time, a rush of excitement, a spark that made her feel alive. She laughed more than she had in months, felt seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. When Liam reached for her hand across the table, she didn't pull away. Instead, she let the moment linger, allowed the emotions to wash over her. That night, Ava crossed a line she could never undo. She went back to Liam's apartment, telling herself it was just for a nightcap. But as the evening blurred into something more intimate, she found herself in his arms, feeling the heat of passion she had been craving. In those hours, the world outside disappeared, Daniel, their life, their years together. It was just her and Liam, and for the first time in a long time, Ava felt the kind of desire that had been missing from her life. The guilt didn't come until the next morning. As she lay in Liam's bed, the sunlight creeping through the blinds, reality crashed down on her. What had she done? She quickly dressed, muttering something about needing to leave, and hurried back to the apartment she shared with Daniel. Her heart raced as she unlocked the door, half expecting him to be waiting there. But of course, he wasn't. He was still on his work trip, completely unaware of the betrayal that had just occurred. For the next few days, Ava was consumed by guilt. Every time she looked at Daniel, she felt a pit of shame in her stomach. He was his usual self, loving, attentive, completely oblivious to the fact that their relationship had fundamentally changed. Ava tried to tell herself it was a mistake, a one-time thing, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She had felt something with Liam that she hadn't felt in years with Daniel, and the longing for that feeling wouldn't just go away. But as the days turned into weeks, Ava found herself torn between two worlds. She loved Daniel, there was no doubt about that. He was her partner, her confidant, the person she had built a life with. But with Liam, she felt something electric, something that made her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. The affair continued, becoming something more than just a fleeting moment of weakness. It became an escape, a secret part of her life that gave her the excitement she craved. Still, the weight of her actions began to take its toll. Ava found herself lying more frequently, telling Daniel she was working late when she was really with Liam, making excuses for her absence, creating a web of deceit that grew more tangled with each passing day. She hated herself for what she was doing, but she couldn't stop. Every time she was with Liam, she felt alive, but every time she was with Daniel, she felt the crushing weight of her betrayal. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, watching a movie, Daniel reached for her hand. His touch, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a reminder of her infidelity. She pulled her hand away, feigning that she needed to adjust her position, but the truth was, she couldn't stand the guilt. "Ava," Daniel said quietly, turning to face her. "Is everything okay?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be?" He frowned, studying her face. "You've been distant lately." "I don't know. I just feel like something's off between us." Ava's heart raced. She had been so careful, hadn't she? She had hidden everything, made sure Daniel would never find out. But now, sitting next to him, she realized just how much her behavior had changed. She wasn't the same person she had been before the affair. And Daniel, in his quiet way, had noticed. "I've just been stressed with work," she lied, looking away. "It's nothing, really." Daniel didn't seem convinced, but he let it go, returning his attention to the movie. Ava, on the other hand, couldn't focus. Her mind was spinning with the weight of her choices. She had been living in two worlds, but now those worlds were starting to collide. How much longer could she keep this up? How much longer could she keep lying to the man she had promised to love? The breaking point came one night, months after the affair had begun. Ava had just returned from seeing Liam when she found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, a look of concern on his face. In front of him was her phone, unlocked and open to a series of texts between her and Liam. Her heart dropped. She had been so careful, always deleting their messages, always making sure there was no trace. But somehow, she had slipped up. "Ava," Daniel began, his voice shaking slightly. "What's going on? Who is Liam?" She felt the world collapse around her. There was no use in denying it. The evidence was right in front of him, and even if it wasn't, the guilt in her heart was too heavy to ignore. Tears filled her eyes as she sat down across from him. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at her, his face a mix of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. How long? He finally asked. Ava swallowed hard. A few months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, leaning back in his chair as if trying to process the enormity of what she had just told him. The silence between them was deafening. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. I thought we were happy. I thought we had something real. Ava's tears flowed freely now. We did. We do. But I don't know, Daniel. I felt like something was missing. I felt like I wasn't alive anymore. And you think this? He gestured to the phone, his voice filled with anger and pain. This was the answer? No, Ava said quickly. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Daniel stood up, pacing the kitchen as he tried to contain his emotions. I gave you everything, Ava. I trusted you. And this is what I get? Ava couldn't find the words to respond. Everything she had done, every lie she had told, had led to this moment. And now, sitting there, watching the man she had loved for so long break before her eyes, she realized how much she had destroyed. I don't know what to do, Daniel said quietly, more to himself than to her. I don't know if I can forgive this. Ava didn't say anything. How could she ask for forgiveness when she wasn't even sure she deserved it? That night, Daniel packed a bag and left their apartment. Ava sat alone in the darkness, her heart heavy with the weight of her choices. The life they had built together over the years, the love, the trust, the bond, was shattered. In the days that followed, they tried to talk, to piece together what was left of their relationship. But the damage was too great. The betrayal too deep. Daniel couldn't look at Ava the same way, and Ava, filled with regret, couldn't undo what had been done. In the end, they parted ways. Years of love, trust, and shared memories were washed away by a few months of deceit. Ava would always regret the choices she had made, and Daniel would always wonder how things could have been different. And though time would heal some wounds, the scars of betrayal would never fully fade. Daniel's reaction was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and deep pain. When he first discovered the truth, sitting at the kitchen table with Ava's phone unlocked and the texts between her and Liam in front of him, his world seemed to fall apart. He had trusted Ava, had believed in the relationship they had built over nearly a decade, and the discovery of her betrayal hit him like a tidal wave. At first, Daniel didn't know how to process the situation. His voice shook with a mixture of confusion and disbelief when he asked, "What's going on? Who is Liam?" His face reflected the turmoil inside him as he tried to make sense of the unimaginable. As Ava tearfully admitted to the affair, the weight of her confession sunk deeper into his heart. He listened quietly, the pain of each revelation compounding the hurt. When he finally found the words, his first question was filled with the ache of betrayal. How long? He needed to know the extent of the lie, the length of time that their life together had been shadowed by her unfaithfulness. As Ava revealed that it had been going on for months, Daniel was devastated. His immediate response was to question everything. He had thought their love was real, that despite the small frustrations and routine of life, they were still happy together. He couldn't comprehend how something so vital could be broken without him even knowing. His voice cracked as he asked, "Why?" "I thought we were happy. I thought we had something real." When Ava explained that she had felt something was missing in their relationship, Daniel's anger surfaced. His pain was so raw that he couldn't hide it any longer. "And you think this betrayal, was the answer?" he demanded, his voice filled with a mix of rage and heartbreak. His trust in her was shattered, and every word she spoke only seemed to deepen the wound. In his frustration and hurt, Daniel stood up and paced, unable to sit still under the crushing weight of what he had just learned. His world, his sense of security, and his belief in the future they were building together had all been obliterated in a single moment. The disbelief in his voice when he said, "I gave you everything, Ava. I trusted you. And this is what I get," reflected the sheer depth of his heartbreak. He felt utterly betrayed, and nothing could erase that feeling in the moment. As the initial surge of anger gave way to sorrow, Daniel admitted that he didn't know what to do. "I don't know if I can forgive this," he whispered, more to himself than to her. The idea of forgiving Ava, of moving forward from such a profound betrayal, seemed impossible. He was lost, unable to reconcile the love he had felt for her with the deep pain she had caused. Ultimately, Daniel left the apartment that night, unable to bear being in the same space as Ava. His heart was broken, and he needed time to think, to process the enormity of what had just happened. The man who had once been so steady, so reliable, was now adrift in a sea of betrayal and confusion. In the days that followed, Daniel struggled with his emotions. He tried to talk with Ava, to understand why she had done what she did, but every conversation only reopened the wound. His trust in her had been shattered, and no amount of apologies or explanations could undo the hurt she had caused. Though he wanted to believe in the love they had shared for so many years, the betrayal was too deep, too painful to overcome. In the end, Daniel couldn't forgive her. The love they had built over years was irreparably damaged by her actions. He left, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. He needed to heal, and staying with Ava would only prolong the pain. Though he still cared for her, the trust between them was gone, and with it, the foundation of their relationship. Daniel's reaction, filled with sorrow, anger, and disbelief, was the natural response of a man whose life had been turned upside down by the betrayal of someone he had deeply loved and trusted for years. After Daniel left, Ava was consumed by guilt and regret. The weight of her actions bore down on her with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. She had never intended for things to spiral so out of control, but now, standing in the empty apartment they had once shared, the reality of her choices hit her hard. The affair with Liam, which had once felt like an exhilarating escape, now seemed hollow in the wake of losing the man she had loved for nearly a decade. In the days immediately following Daniel's departure, Ava fell into a deep emotional turmoil. Every room in the apartment reminded her of the life they had built together, happy memories, quiet moments, and all the times Daniel had been there for her. She hadn't realized just how much she had taken their life together for granted until it was gone. Her mind raced with questions. How could she have done this? Why hadn't she talked to Daniel when she first started feeling distant? Was there any chance to fix things? The messages from Liam, once a source of excitement, became a burden. She ignored his calls and texts, unable to face him. The affair that had seemed like an answer to her boredom and dissatisfaction was now a constant reminder of the damage she had caused. Ava felt trapped between two worlds, one with Liam that no longer made sense and the other with Daniel that she had destroyed. One evening, a few weeks after Daniel left, Ava sat alone at the kitchen table, the same place where Daniel had confronted her. She replayed that night over and over in her head, remembering the look of hurt and disbelief on his face. The guilt was suffocating, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized how deeply she had hurt him. She knew that there was no going back, but she couldn't stop wishing she could undo everything. Ava attempted to reach out to Daniel a few times, sending him long, heartfelt messages apologizing for her actions and expressing how much she regretted what had happened. She wanted to explain, to somehow make him understand that she had never stopped loving him, but she also knew that her words couldn't erase the pain she had caused. Daniel's responses, if he even responded, were short and distant. He was clearly moving on, and that was the most painful truth Ava had to face. She had lost him for good. Her career, once a source of joy and fulfillment, began to suffer as well. Ava found it hard to concentrate at work, her mind constantly drifting back to what she had done and what she had lost. The creative spark that had once driven her in her interior design projects felt dimmed. Her colleagues noticed her withdrawal, but she couldn't bring herself to explain the emotional storm she was going through. As the weeks turned into months, Ava realized that she had to confront what she had been avoiding, herself. She had been so focused on escaping the monotony she felt in her relationship with Daniel that she hadn't stopped to understand why she felt that way in the first place. The affair with Liam had been a symptom of deeper issues: her fear of stagnation, her craving for excitement, and her inability to communicate openly with Daniel. She began seeing a therapist to help process the overwhelming guilt and confusion. In therapy, Ava came to understand that the dissatisfaction she had felt wasn't solely Daniel's fault, nor was it entirely her own. It was a failure of communication, a breakdown in the emotional connection that they had once shared. Instead of addressing those issues with Daniel, she had run from them, seeking validation and excitement from someone else. She had been selfish, but now she was determined to face her flaws and grow from them. Liam, on the other hand, slowly faded from her life. The affair had never been built on anything lasting, it had been fueled by the thrill of the forbidden and the allure of something new. Once the reality of the situation set in, Ava realized that she and Liam were not meant for each other. Their connection had been shallow, a temporary escape rather than a foundation for something real. After a few uncomfortable conversations, Ava ended things with him for good. She needed to be alone to figure out who she was and what she truly wanted. The healing process was slow, and there were days when Ava felt like she was drowning in regret. She would replay memories of her life with Daniel, of their first trip together, the time they moved into their apartment, and the countless moments of laughter and love. Those memories, once a source of comfort, now felt bittersweet. They reminded her of what she had lost and of the person she had betrayed, not just Daniel, but herself. Ava eventually moved out of the apartment. Staying there, surrounded by reminders of the life she had shared with Daniel, had become too painful. She found a small studio across town, a place where she could start fresh. The new space was bare at first, but slowly, she began to fill it with pieces that reflected her evolving sense of self: artwork, plants, and small touches that gave the apartment life. It became a sanctuary for her healing, a place where she could rebuild. As time went on, Ava began to rediscover herself outside of the relationship she had once defined herself by. She immersed herself in her work, throwing herself into new design projects with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Slowly, her creative energy returned, and she started to find joy in her work again. She also began reconnecting with friends, building a support system that helped her through the darkest moments of her guilt and shame. Ava never fully forgave herself for what had happened, but she learned to live with it. She accepted that she had made terrible choices, but she also came to understand that she was capable of change and growth. Her relationship with Daniel was over, and though she would always carry the pain of losing him, she knew that she couldn't let that define the rest of her life. One day, while walking through the city, Ava ran into Daniel. It was awkward at first, both of them unsure of what to say. But there was also a sense of closure. They exchanged polite conversation, both acknowledging the past without dwelling on it. Daniel seemed different, happier, lighter. He had moved on, and seeing him like that, Ava realized that she too was on the path to healing. In the end, Ava learned that betrayal doesn't just hurt the person betrayed, it also breaks the one who betrays. But through the pain, she found a chance to reflect, to grow, and to become someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes again. The love she had shared with Daniel was gone, but the lessons from that love stayed with her, shaping her into someone stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of facing the complexities of love and life. Daniel's healing process after the betrayal was difficult and painful, but over time, he managed to find peace and move forward. In the immediate aftermath of discovering Ava's infidelity, Daniel was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and deep sadness. The foundation of his relationship with Ava, built over nearly a decade, had been shattered in an instant. He couldn't understand how the woman he had loved and trusted could betray him so deeply. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him, leaving him adrift in a sea of doubt. When Daniel left the apartment that night, he took only a small bag with him, not knowing where he would go or how long he would be away. He stayed with a close friend, someone who had known both him and Ava for years. His friend provided him with a safe space to process his emotions and offered support without judgment. Daniel spent the first few days in a kind of numb shock, replaying the events in his mind, trying to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong. At first, he struggled to accept that the life he had envisioned with Ava was over. They had talked about a future together, about marriage, kids, and growing old side by side. Now, all of that was gone, and Daniel was left with a profound sense of loss, not just for Ava, but for the life they had built together. He felt betrayed not only by her actions but also by the illusion of stability and love he had believed in for so long. In those early weeks, Daniel fluctuated between anger and sorrow. Some days, he felt furious at Ava for what she had done, for breaking his trust and tearing their relationship apart. Other days, he blamed himself, wondering if there had been signs he had missed, if there was something he could have done differently to prevent the betrayal. The weight of those questions lingered in his mind, making it hard for him to sleep or focus on anything else. One of the key moments in Daniel's healing process came when he decided to see a therapist. At first, he was hesitant. He had always been the type to handle things on his own, relying on his logical, methodical approach to work through problems. But this was different. The emotional toll of the betrayal was too great, and he realized he needed help to navigate the storm inside him. Therapy became a safe space for him to unpack his feelings, to explore the deep hurt and confusion that came with the betrayal. In therapy, Daniel learned to understand his emotions in a new way. He realized that while Ava's infidelity had broken his heart, it didn't define his worth or his ability to love and be loved. The betrayal was a reflection of her choices, not a reflection of his shortcomings as a partner. That understanding, though painful, was crucial for him to stop blaming himself for what had happened. During his sessions, Daniel also confronted the deeper issues that had surfaced in their relationship. As much as he had loved Ava, he acknowledged that they had fallen into a routine that lacked the passion and connection they once had. They had stopped communicating effectively, and both of them had grown complacent in certain ways. He realized that their relationship, while strong on the surface, had cracks underneath that neither of them had addressed. Understanding this helped Daniel let go of some of the anger he felt toward Ava, even though her actions were inexcusable. As the months went by, Daniel began to slowly rebuild his life. He poured himself into his work, finding solace in the structure and logic of his job as a software engineer. Focusing on his career gave him a sense of control at a time when everything else felt chaotic. He also reconnected with friends he hadn't seen in a while, people who provided support and distraction during some of his hardest days. These friendships became vital to his recovery, giving him moments of joy and laughter that helped him heal. One of the hardest parts of the healing process for Daniel was learning to trust again. Ava's betrayal had left deep scars, and the idea of opening up to someone new felt daunting. He questioned whether he could ever be vulnerable with another person after what had happened. However, through therapy and his own self-reflection, Daniel came to realize that trust was something that could be rebuilt, not just with someone new, but within himself. He learned to trust his instincts again, to believe that he could make better choices in the future, and that not all relationships would end in betrayal. A turning point came when Daniel decided to move out of the apartment he had shared with Ava. Though he had been staying with friends for months, the apartment still held so many memories of their life together, both good and bad. Moving into a new space symbolized a fresh start for him. He found a small place of his own, where he could begin to create a life that wasn't tied to the past. Decorating his new home became an act of reclaiming his independence and building something new for himself. Over time, Daniel also found himself reflecting on forgiveness. Not necessarily the act of forgiving Ava outright, but the idea of letting go of the resentment that had taken root in his heart. He realized that holding on to that anger would only hurt him in the long run. Ava's betrayal had already taken so much from him, his peace of mind, his trust, his relationship, but he refused to let it take away his future happiness. Gradually, he learned to release the bitterness and focus on his own healing. Months later, when Daniel unexpectedly ran into Ava in the city, he felt a strange sense of calm. The awkwardness between them was palpable, but Daniel realized that the sight of her no longer hurt the way it once had. Seeing Ava reminded him of the pain, but it also showed him how far he had come. He had rebuilt his life without her, had grown into a stronger and more self-aware person. Ava apologized again during their brief conversation, but Daniel, while polite, knew that the real closure had come from within himself. He didn't need her apology to move on, he had already done that on his own. In time, Daniel started dating again. It wasn't easy, and at first, he was cautious, hesitant to let anyone get too close. But as he continued to heal, he allowed himself to be more open. Slowly, he began to trust again, building new relationships with the lessons he had learned from his past. He was more communicative, more aware of his own needs, and more willing to address issues before they became insurmountable. Through all of this, Daniel's journey to healing was marked by self-reflection, emotional growth, and the rebuilding of trust, not just in others, but in himself. The betrayal he experienced had been devastating, but it didn't define him. In the end, Daniel emerged from the experience stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace the future, knowing that he was capable of love and happiness once again.